Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Forward Focus, our opportunity to invite unique guests on to talk about one of my favorite topics, forward focus, meaning taking a look into the future, focusing into the future, planning into the future. We've had various guests on our podcast, business people, generational business people, but today we have the distinct and I will say unique opportunity to have somebody that really fits the definition of forward focus. And that is my friend and my colleague, Andy Doctoroff, a lawyer by training and profession, but a consultant and a business person in trade, someone that did forward focus, made a monumental career change, and no looking back. And so what a perfect guest and what an honor and privilege to have Andy on to talk about that. So let me just give you a little background. Andy is a lawyer. Andy attended Harvard University, an undergrad, distinguished graduate of the University of Michigan Law School, and a practicing lawyer at a prominent law firm for many, many years, where at some point, we're going to talk about this today, he made the absolute career change and go in a different direction. And his story is riveting and fascinating, and we're going to jump right in. So without further ado, let's welcome Andy Doctoroff, my friend, my colleague. Andy, as I said, a pleasure to have you on today.
Hey, buddy. How are you? It's great to be here.
And great to have you on. I love your story. And so let's just, as I said, jump in. So here you are, law school graduate, a litigator, working for a prominent law firm, in the trenches, as we say as lawyers, and you decide after considerable thought, I'm making a career change. So why don't we just start with that? Tell us the background into that decision and what made you pull that trigger finally and do what you're doing, and you'll tell us what you're doing.
Well, I would say, and thanks for inviting me again and the question. I, in retrospect, was very surprised about where I landed, but I knew I wanted to make a change. I made that change about 12 and a half years ago when I was 50 years old. And I went from Honigman as a commercial litigator to working for Governor Snyder to oversee Michigan's participation in the Gordie Howe International Bridge project. And again, it was a great surprise to find myself in that position, having been asked to do that, to play that role. But I was kind of preparing myself psychologically for a meaningful change, irrespective of the fact I didn't know what the change would be. I'd been doing the same thing for many years. I was filling out at the end of the year the same billings and collections memo that, most practicing lawyers at our age do. I thought that life is short. Both my parents died early in their 60s. And I wanted to say that while, yes, I love in many ways the practice of law, that I wanted to explore new frontiers. And when the opportunity presented itself to me, I jumped and, as you said earlier, never looked back. I have not had an unhappy day for the last 12 and a half, almost 13 years, working in the infrastructure space. I'm no longer with the bridge project, but I've done a lot of other things. And now I'm at WSP, an infrastructure and consulting and advisory services firm that has a global reach.
So unbelievable, because as a litigator, commercial litigator, correct? Business litigator.
Yeah.
To infrastructure consultant, to, of all people, the then sitting governor. I talk about a 180. That's a 180. It's not in any way related to litigation. You put down the litigation tools, if you will, and went to work in a completely different sector, right?
Well, not totally. I really still do. And after I was hired, I really did applied my litigation skills. When I got hired, the bridge project was deeply embroiled with in a generational dispute with the Maroon family. They were trying to kill the project, and they were trying to do it in a bunch of different ways. One of them was in the courts. So one of my responsibilities was to make sure that the cases with the Maroons were being litigated effectively, thoroughly, that we good legal counsel, that the briefs were written as they needed to be written. And at one point, I think we had more than 20 some separate lawsuits pending, many of them related as necessity challenges. And irrespective of my having, some remaining role in litigation aspects of the Gordie Howe project, I think that you'll find that as a lawyer, we learn to think certain ways, or at least many of us do. We learn to dissect problems in certain ways that are really, really transferable to any area in the professional realm. So I think I apply my skills as a lawyer every day. That said, I'm not practicing law, and I haven't practiced law since I left Honingman.
It still is amazing. It was a transformational change for you, for your family, and in essence, you became a government employee, correct? You were.
Oh yeah, I was working for the governor's office, and Governor Whitmer retained me to do the same thing. I was doing that as a private consultant, but burrowed very deeply in the government. So I always considered myself effectively to be a government employee. And then after the bridge project, I went to United States Department of Transportation to work for the office of the Secretary Buttigieg, to open up an office of project delivery. So I've only been in the private sector in the infrastructure space for a matter of 9 months or so.
That's amazing. That's amazing. By the way, you're tossing out big names here. So you left Honingman, you went to work directly for Governor Snyder at the time, the sitting governor, and you had a one-to-one relationship with the governor at the time?
I don't know what one-to-one exactly means, but he was deeply involved in the project. He got updates from me regularly. His staff did. The project, in my mind, would not exist were it not for his incredible leadership. He took on his own caucus in the legislature, and it stayed throughout his entire tenure, a key priority for his administration. So I guess, and we still have contact, and yeah, he and I have a nice relationship.
Well, and perhaps I shouldn't have said one-to-one, but you had FaceTime with the sitting governor. You had to interact with him and get to know him. He got to know you. Sure, if you're walking down the street, the former governor would know you, and
we'd hug each other.
That's amazing. And then another party comes into power. The Democratic Party comes into power through Governor Whitmer, and you continue on. Tell us about that. How did that work?
Well, that was interesting because, many years have passed since that time, and I didn't know whether I'd be asked to stay. I don't know whether they viewed me as someone on the other team in this highly polarized partisan era. And they very well may have thought about getting rid of me or retaining someone else to do the job. But I think during that transition period, when, the new administration is trying to learn what's going on, they appreciated, and particularly the governor's legal counsel appreciated, how much expertise would be lost if I were no longer with the project, and how a new administration without some guy like me bridging the two administrations would require them to kind of climb a very steep learning curve. So I was asked to stay, and that's when I made the change. Well, no, actually, I was asked to stay, and when I did, I stayed on as a private consultant.
And no pun in the bridge between the two administrations intended, right? But
none intended.
But you stayed on the bridge project for the new administration.
Yeah. And then I, was fortunate enough to take on several other roles that I was asked to play. For instance, Governor Snyder asked me to be his representative on the, Detroit-Wayne County Port Authority. So I did that for 4 years as a volunteer. And also as a volunteer, I was on the Mackinac Straits Corridor Authority for Enbridge Line 5, where I applied a lot of the skills that I had developed when it comes to project oversight and management. So it was great for me to be able to spread my wings in different areas other than the bridge project. And I've continued to expand that kind of breadth of experience in this space. And every day has been an adventure.
So before I go on to your role with Secretary Buttigieg, which is also enormous and just an incredible opportunity for you, tell me, you obviously worked with the leaders of our state. You worked with two governors and two administrations. What did you learn about leadership and the process in your role as a direct in a direct link to then Governor Snyder and as a consultant to Governor Whitmer?
I don't think there's anything that necessarily all leaders think or all leaders do or all leaders need. Everyone's got a different leadership style. For example, you know, Governor Snyder never read from talking points. He listened carefully. I don't know whether it's a photographic memory, but he remembers a lot. So how you would engage with him is different than how you would engage with a different leader. But broadly speaking, I think every leader who wants to do the right thing has to be informed and has to think about area issues from multiple different perspectives, has to be intellectually proactive. And if they're all of those things, then the odds are greatly increased that government will work. If those things aren't done, and if the leaders are not surrounded by people who share those characteristics, I think our government is more likely to fail. And I've been very fortunate, particularly with Governor Snyder, uh, although no administration is perfect, of course, and every administration has its real failures, to really work with a bunch of people who I think embodied intellectual independence, intellectual proactivity, trying to make sure they're doing what's in the public's interest. And I'm not saying that the Whitmer expedition didn't do that. Of course, they did that as well. Uh, I just find that my experience with the Snyder administration really was wonderful because it gave me confidence, knowing very little about the government from the insider's perspective. Yeah, that we really do have some good leaders who are very civic minded.
So our listeners can really appreciate what you've done here. We're talking about the Gordie Howe Bridge. What's the cost of that bridge?
The cost of the entire project, which includes two ports of entry that are state of the art, the bridge itself, and a new interchange that's hugely complex at I-75, is about 4.7 billion US dollars.
So just an enormous cost, a project that is just so magnanimous, so just, you know, in size and in proportion. It's just huge. And we're about to open that bridge.
Right.
So you get the vantage point of looking back now and seeing an actual physical part of your efforts, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it is the best feeling in the world. I work on the 26th floor of the Guardian building right now, and I look out my window and I see that structure with those cables that span across the Detroit River. It's a beautiful sight. And I'm so lucky to know that I contributed to that undertaking, which, is a mammoth one, as you're suggesting. And, I was flying to New York maybe a month ago on business, and I was probably, 4,000, 5,000 feet, probably way higher than that, actually. And I just captured this beautiful picture in the clouds of the span crossing the Detroit River. And, it reminded me that, the team with which I worked really have had an impact on what, people in this area are going to be using to travel, to increase opportunity, to increase connections from a commercial or from a interpersonal perspective. It's just a great feeling, know that you're contributing. That's why I like infrastructure so much, because it really is all about connections and opportunities.
Well, I wanted to talk about that. So let's dive into that for a minute. I mean, someone tosses out the word infrastructure. I mean, it sounds kind of boring, perhaps.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You're a litigator, you're in the courtroom, a lot of drama, and someone says, hey, you want to get involved in a massive infrastructure project. I mean, what motivated you to jump into infrastructure?
Well, I thought it was boring too. When I think infrastructure, I think technical specifications. I think engineers, doing their thing. I'm not a technical guy, and it was not exciting. I think of roads. I think of potholes. Like they're the bread and butter of what we need, societally speaking. But are they exciting? No. But the deeper I got into infrastructure, the more I realized that I was wrong, because infrastructure is all about not only creating that opportunity, not only creating that connectivity between people, um, but also teamwork. The big difference between my practice of law, I was a commercial litigator, and the world of infrastructure is that in the latter world, you're a member of a team, and even if you're, if you represent one stakeholder as opposed to another in a project, you're all trying to achieve the same end, which is to create something. And to be a part of that team, creating something with other professionals or other people who have subject matter expertise is very different, as you know, Craig, from commercial litigation, where so many people view it as a zero sum game. And therefore, for the first time in my career, I was doing teamwork when everyone involved in the enterprise has the same goal: great feeling, great opportunity.
Now, I know your story to some degree, and I know that the Gordie Howe Bridge led you to the Secretary of Transportation under the Biden administration. And tell us about that. So how did one open the door to the other, and what did you do for Secretary Buttigieg?
It was very serendipitous. There was no connection between me and Secretary Buttigieg. I always admired him. I still greatly admire him. But I was at a fundraiser in New York, a function at which my brother and sister-in-law were being honored. And I happened to have a conversation with someone who told me that the Department of Transportation, because of all of the money that was now being appropriated and allocated for major infrastructure projects, was hiring folks to help make sure those projects that were being funded by the government were going to be successfully delivered, to make sure that the office of the secretary has, proper understanding of the projects, know where they are, and is overseeing them in a way that appropriately accounts for, the taxpayer dollars being spent on them, and again, ensures forward progress. So once I heard about that, someone called on my behalf. I connected, and one thing leads to another, and I ended up working there for about 14 or 15 months until just shortly after the Trump administration started.
So again, you had a chance to interface with the Secretary of Transportation.
Not as much with either as with either of the governors, but sure, this was his idea, and he was very interested in making sure that we do infrastructure right, and that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing, and that there's accountability. And so he would ask lots of questions. He would preside over meetings where all these projects were discussed, and he really is an incredible idea generator. And it would be great to have a government who has a lot more people like the Secretary Pete Buttigieg.
But I'm just overly fascinated with your story, your career path. I mean, one day you're downtown working for Honigman as a litigator. You decide to take a leap that many people are afraid to take. You take it. You end up working for the then sitting governor on the Gordie Howe Bridge project. The successor administration takes you in. You then are a consultant to the then sitting governor, Governor Whitmer. And next you find yourself in the Department of Transportation in a interface position with the Secretary of Transportation. Your resume is exploding at this point. You got to be like the hottest infrastructure candidate to be found, probably.
Uh,
And
I don't know about that.
well, I think so. And let's add to that resume. I know you are a adjunct professor at the University of Michigan Law School teaching infrastructure, right?
Right. I haven't done that since I started this job, but I presumably will go back to that once I get my sea legs here.
And who better to inspire law students than you with this story? It's really incredible. As you know, Andy, I'm a person that doesn't believe things happen by accident, and your story is just a great story, and none of this is just luck. There's someone may say, "Oh, Andy's just lucky, and he was at the right place at the right time." I don't think that story reads that way at all. I think that you took advantage and seized opportunities, and one led to the next, and the next, and the next, and here you are today with just an incredible resume and a story. Which is just fascinating. Let's talk a minute about how that decision, what is it now, 18 years ago when you decided to jump off the Honigman Bridge, if you
13.
will? 13. How did that impact your family?
Well, Stacy, the greatest thing in my life with my kids. I said, Stacy, this is going to require, a different way of spending our money and thinking about savings. And, you go from a private sector / Honigman income to a public sector one, and there's a big difference. And Stacy is just wonderful because we're true partners and she wants what makes me happy. And, we discussed it together. And the only thing she said is, Andy, the only thing I'm going to ask for when you're making less money is that the kids are going to continue to go to Camp Tamaqua because they loved camp. It was a huge part of their identity. I said, that's it, done, easy to do. So, that was the only thing she asked for. She has been my biggest supporter in terms of doing what, allowing me to do what I want to do, so long as, I'm honoring my obligations to my family, which I've always done, I think. And so she's always been down to earth. She's never cared about country club memberships. She's never cared about, a lot of the things that other people care about. In our family, we're all about experiences and we're all about relationships. And as long as we continue to have new enriching experiences and meaningful, deeply rooted relationships, we're going to be very happy. And Stacy's herself has got a great job, so she's not overly invested in me. She's a very successful clinical therapist. So we have rich lives, and we recognize that. She recognized that, and we also thought it would be great for the kids because the kids saw me working really hard, but maybe it was good for them to see me working still hard, but something that was truly a passion for less money, to say, oh, maybe there are different types of futures that I can imagine rather than a more conventional professional existence where, the fundamental metric ultimately is how much do you make? And I hope the kids were enriched by observing how happy I was in a different type of profession.
Well, as a father and of course as a role model, I don't think you could inspire your children in any greater way than showing them you got to live for your passion and not necessarily for the almighty dollar, and follow your passion. I take it you'd agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
I think all the kids get it to different degrees because they have to learn on their own. They have to mature. Two of them live in New York. One of them lives in Chicago. Things are really expensive. So they're doing their own struggles with money and, how, status and what it takes to rent an apartment in those cities. And so they're on their own journeys, but hopefully when they're on their journeys, when they continue, they'll be thinking, hey, there are more than one ways to skin a cat.
So, as you know, my podcast is Forward Focus, and you made that decision. You put a lot of thought into it. It was not an easy decision for you, I'm sure, right? A lot of thought and a lot of deliberation went into your decision to make a 180 change in your career at age 50, right?
Yeah. Well, it was a 3-year process, Craig. I don't know if you remember, but I had heart surgery when I was 47 years old.
Of course, I, of
And
course, I.
that surgery and the difficulty I had recovering from it kind of allowed me, it gave me a license to think more creatively in a way that I probably wouldn't have had I not had that surgery and that difficult recovery. And, for those 3 years, it was all about thinking about enriching my life experientially. How can I do it while still honoring my obligations to my family and still being excited about what I do? I even took the GREs because I was thinking maybe I want to be a psychologist and get my PhD. So I was experimenting with a lot of ideas. And again, I was very fortunate that the governor and his team asked me to do that. And that only happened because I was involved in the bar and I was chairing a committee that ended up gaining the governor's attention.
Now, if we look in the rear view mirror, perhaps you do. Any regrets?
No, as a matter of fact, from my perspective, that's the greatest thing about being our age, 62, 63, that if you're happy where you are right now, with the experiences you've had, with your kids, with your family, with your neighborhood, your community, your friends, even if I would have done things differently at, certain points, theoretically, or even though I've had this failure or that failure along the way, I have not one single regret because I'm happy where I am right now. And I might have had regrets had I not made this move, but given where I am, I don't have one regret. I'm a happy dude.
It's amazing. Tell the listeners what lies ahead for Andy Doctoroff.
Well, I don't know. I do know that at this stage, life is all about experiences. I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I'm all over the country trying to win pursuits or work on projects uh, in various areas, ports, urban development, bridges. But at the same time, uh, as I mentioned, I think earlier, um, people have passed away early in my family. You know this, Craig, that my brother Dan is very sick with ALS. My dad died of it. My uncle died of it. And so, I'm not saying it's necessarily a sword of Damocles, but I don't know how much time I have left. And I want to make sure that every year at this stage, now that, we're financially fine, is, something that is rewarding and a good experience. And that allows me to grow and see things through a new perspective, through new lenses with different perspectives. So I plan on staying here, but I assure you that the, as time goes by, I'll always be looking and saying, am I truly, continuing to enrich myself? So I don't know, but I know that I'll think actually quite creatively about the next phase as well as I have about this one.
Andy, we're gonna have some fun for a second. I'm gonna throw
Okay.
you what I think are some softballs. So let's start with this. Most influential person in your life.
I'm going to say there are two most influential people in my life. The first is my identical twin. Um, and the reason why is we're as close can be. We're like bonded polar ions right now. We were spent 9 months in the womb together and never in many ways separated. And it is amazing to have a relationship with someone who just shows me how important relationships are and how rewarding they can be. So Tom is my North Star in that regard and always has been. And the other one is in terms of influence, Stacy, my wife, because we came at
She paid you to say
she
this.
didn't. She didn't. Let me tell you why. Because we came from very different backgrounds. And I grew up thinking very conventionally about ambition, about quote unquote success, about professionalism. Stacy's family's background was a little bit differently than mine. And she always asked me implicitly to look at life through a different lens. And were I not married to Stacy, I'm sure we would not be having this type of conversation right now. And she's just the greatest partner someone could have. So those are the two influential people in my life. Uh, sure, I'm sorry if that's too conventional for you.
It's not. It's great. I love it. Favorite book and why?
Okay. Well, I thought about that. I would have to say Truman by David McCullough. And the reason is it was the first book I ever read that was truly long and completed it. I was not a good reader, a disciplined reader as a younger guy. When I had to read something for classes in college, I would go to the book reviews. I just didn't have what it took for whatever reason to read long books and invest in them. And I was swept away by Truman. And it was well over 1,000 pages. I said, oh my God, here's this independent-minded person who was at the fulcrum of history, who was a flawed but wonderful man. And that book has always stayed with me. I've read every single David McCullough book, largely because of my initial love for Truman.
Last one for you. Single best decision that you made in your life so far, and why? And you've already talked about Stacy.
Okay, so we'll take her off the list.
Let's make it single best business professional decision you've made in your life, and why?
Oh, well, that to me is easy, which is joining the governor's administration in early 2013. It set me on a new trajectory. And I think I said this earlier in the conversation, but I literally have not had an unhappy day since I switched. And while I had plenty of happy days as a practicing lawyer, every day wasn't happy, and they were not as dynamic and not as, how would I say it? They weren't as meaningful as the days since have been.
Andy, what can I say? You were a terrific guest.
Don't get too close. Don't get too close.
You're just a terrific guest. We've gone over 30 minutes here, which is longer than I normally do, but it was just so inspiring and great to hear you. Your story could go on for a long time. Terrific guest.
Thanks for asking.
I loved having you here, and it was just terrific. Tell people where they can find you, Andy.
If anyone wants to get a hold of me, feel free, adoctoroff@gmail.com.
And I'm Craig Zucker at Maddin Hauser, and we're open for business 24/7. You can reach us reach me at czucker@maddinhauser.com. Happy to answer any questions or continue this discussion at any time. Thanks for listening in, and remember, always forward focus.